The intense pain made him momentarily forget about moving objects, leading him to instinctively kick the boy away. This action drew amused reactions from the other thugs, who found it comical that someone like him, known for his yellow hair and not his strength, could manage such a kick. Despite the throbbing pain in his backside, he couldn't help but mentally play along, imagining how impressive the moment might have seemed if it had been captured on camera. Auntie Lin, having fallen in front of her grandson, reached out to him with visible distress, her face a mix of worry and despair. Chen Zhenghao, observing the scene, felt no pity. Instead, he regarded her with a cold satisfaction, seeing this as a just outcome for her earlier deceit toward her neighbors. Around them, several homeowners watched with approval, their faces showing a shared sense of vindication. They believed that harsh measures were necessary to handle someone they saw as a swindler, feeling a sense of relief that Chen Zhenghao had stepped up where they felt powerless. As these thoughts passed through his mind, a subtle smirk appeared on his face. He knew the others didn't grasp the broader implications. Today, it was Auntie Lin's home that was violated. Tomorrow, it could easily be theirs. However, he felt secure, knowing his own 2-meter-thick steel door would withstand any attempt, even if someone tried to breach it with a tank. Shortly after, Auntie Lin desperately sought help in the homeowner group chat, requesting critical medications, hemostatic drugs, anti-shock treatments, and antibiotics for her injured grandson. The urgency of the situation was clear, as Dr. Zhou needed these medicines for emergency surgery. The mention of Dr. Zhou sparked a moment of recognition for him. Zhou Qi had been a savior in the previous world, and now, it seemed, she was poised to save Auntie Lin's grandson. However, Auntie Lin's pleas for help, including promises of deep gratitude, were met with derision. The other homeowners expressed no sympathy, instead mocking her for asking for help after deceiving them and taking their supplies. The lack of compassion only reinforced the idea that this was a form of karmic retribution for Auntie Lin's past actions. As the situation unfolded, he couldn't help but sigh. Auntie Lin was facing the consequences of her past, and with the relentless snowstorm, the outside world had become nearly inaccessible. Even if her grandson was saved, the harsh reality of dwindling resources loomed over everyone. The snow, now nearly reaching the first-floor windows. News of the global snowstorm had already spread, with reports labeling it as a once-in-100,000-years event. Yet, no one could predict the full extent of this catastrophe. In just a week, the world had nearly been buried under relentless snowfall. In northern cities, temperatures had plummeted to a staggering -100 degrees Celsius. Many who attempted to escape southward froze to death on the way. In the homeowner group chat, Auntie Lin began to appeal to her neighbors' sense of morality, lamenting that her young grandson had been without food for 2 days. She asked if they were really willing to let a child die. Despite her pleas, the homeowners saw an opportunity and started to hike up prices. The last pack of instant noodles was sold for an astronomical $2,000. Observing this, I couldn't help but chuckle. These people weren't grasping the severity of the situation. Soon, they'd realize that paper money wouldn't even be worth using as toilet paper. Su Hao, a second-generation rich kid with some business savvy, began hoarding supplies at inflated prices. He understood well that in this apocalyptic scenario, money would soon become worthless. His goal was to offload it while it still held value. Meanwhile, a single mother in the group made a desperate plea, explaining that she and her daughter were on the brink of starvation and hoping for any help. This brought a knowing smile to my face. In the past life, this woman and her daughter had managed to survive for an unexpectedly long time. Xiaolime was not as helpless as she appeared. 10 days passed in what felt like an instant. I continued to enjoy my solitude at home, relishing the quiet. But then, the phone on my table rang. Recognizing the caller ID, I couldn't suppress a cold laugh. So, she finally caved in? I opened the video chat, my tone dripping with sarcasm. The sight of food behind me made the two people on the other end visibly envious. They couldn't help but ask how I still had so much food, questioning whether I had hoarded it last time. They also noticed I was sweating despite the extreme cold outside and wondered why. Smiling, I casually explained that I had installed a fireplace in my home. It was so warm that I felt like going for a run outside. Immediately, Fan Yuqing, one of the callers, tried to ingratiate herself, praising my foresight and preparation. She even asked if she could come over to take a shower. Internally, I scoffed at their attempts. Did they still think they could manipulate me so easily? Without a second thought, I rejected her request, adding a taunt about staying warm in the negative 100-degree weather. My response instantly infuriated Fan Yuqing, who snapped back, angered by my words. She accused me of going too far, arguing that while I might not want to help, I shouldn't make things worse with sarcasm. Her frustration only made me laugh. Did she still think I was someone to be easily manipulated? I dismissed her, suggesting she seek help from her so-called rich kid, and reminded her that we had no ties that obligated me to assist her. With that, I ended the video call, leaving her seething on the other end. Fan Yuqing was livid, unable to believe that I had turned the tables on her. Her best friend, Lin Caning, couldn't resist adding a few pointed observations, noting that I had proven to be far more resourceful than they had given me credit for. Lin Caning remarked that if she had known Fan Yuqing would fail, she would have made a move herself, and now, they were left with nothing. This only fueled Fan Yuqing's anger further, leading to a heated scuffle between the two on the bed. Meanwhile, the government, unable to keep the snow disaster under wraps any longer, made an official announcement on television. They revealed that power would be rationed, with electricity available only for an hour each day, and even then, only enough to power low-energy appliances. With most power plants shut down, electricity had become a scarce resource, and the public was urged to use it sparingly to avoid widespread blackouts. The homeowner group chat buzzed with activity once again. Some members discussed the news, confirming that the rumors circulating online were true. Just as everyone was grappling with the dire situation, someone offered instant noodles for sale at the steep price of $5,000 per pack. The absurdity of the situation made me shake my head. In the middle of an apocalypse, they still believed that life-saving supplies could be traded for worthless paper money. With survival at stake, filling one's stomach had become the highest priority, and no one would care about paper currency when hunger set in. On the other side of Fan Yuqing and Lin Caning, after their brief tussle, began to calm down. Realizing that their attempts at manipulation had failed, they decided to switch tactics. Fan Yuqing picked up her phone and contacted her #1 bootlicker, spinning a wild tale about how I supposedly tried to take advantage of her just because I had food. Zhou Peng, enraged by the fabricated story, swore to take me down, feeling that it was his duty to protect his loyalty to Fan Yuqing. Seeing that Zhou Peng was fully on board, Fan Yuqing leaned into the lie, suggesting that they should take over my house so they could live there together. Zhou Peng, driven by a mix of anger and misplaced devotion, agreed without hesitation. However, before they could act on their plan, they knew they needed to prepare some weapons. Before long, the three of them, Fan Yuqing, Lin Caning, and Zhou Peng, arrived at my doorstep, each gripping a kitchen knife. Zhou Peng, hiding his knife behind his back, knocked on the door and called out in a friendly tone, pretending to be a colleague in need. He asked if I could lend him some food, offering fever medication in exchange. Little did they know, I had been watching their entire approach through my surveillance cameras. Seeing the weapons they carried, I felt a surge of anger. Did they really think they could kill me so easily? I decided it was time to remind them that the tiger, when provoked, would not be mistaken for a sick cat. An idea struck me as I noticed the waste pile I had been accumulating. I attached a hose to the tap, preparing to give them a taste of their own foolishness. Approaching the door, I called out loudly, pretending to be cooperative, and promised that I would make sure everyone got something to eat. Hearing this, the three of them excitedly raised their weapons, thinking I was about to open the door. But instead of food, a blast of foul-smelling waste sprayed through a small window in the door, covering them in filth. Fan Yuqing immediately recognized what had hit them and began to vomit in disgust. Zhou Peng, his anger reaching a boiling point, shouted at the top of his lungs, threatening to kill me if I had the guts to face him. I couldn't help but laugh at his empty threats. I taunted him, daring him to try breaking into my house. Enraged, Zhou Peng struck my front door with his knife, only to find it completely ineffective. The impact injured his hand, and he realized too late that my 2-meter-thick security door was far beyond their ability to breach. Watching the scene unfold, I found myself amused by their futile efforts. I had stockpiled enough supplies to last for years, and the security of my home was impenetrable. Even if they decided to camp outside, there was nothing they could do to harm me. I felt secure in my fortress, knowing that their attempts were nothing more than a nuisance. Later, I was jolted awake by the sound of a gunshot. Although I had anticipated that human nature would reveal its darkest sides in this post-apocalyptic world, the sudden shot still sent a shiver down my spine. Someone in the community had a gun. I quickly grabbed my tablet and began reviewing the surveillance footage. It didn't take long to discover that Chen Zhenghao and his gang were going house to house, robbing residents of their supplies. With the water supply cut off, most people were forced to venture outside to dig snow for water, and Chen Zhenghao was taking full advantage of this vulnerable moment. After each raid, Chen Zhenghao would assert his dominance in the homeowners group chat, posting threatening messages and photos to intimidate everyone. He declared himself the ruler of the building, warning that anyone who opposed him would face severe consequences. His ruthless tactics, while effective in instilling fear, were also a reminder of why he had thrived in society before the apocalypse. However, I knew that his power was not absolute, his ammunition and followers were finite, and they couldn't possibly keep all the residents in check forever. As I pondered the situation, I was suddenly added to a new group chat. Several homeowners had come together to denounce Chen Zhenghao's actions, calling for unity against his tyranny. They argued that even with a gun, he couldn't take on everyone in the building if they banded together. When the question of when to take action arose, a few cautious voices suggested the need for careful planning. Reading these messages, I couldn't help but laugh at the irony. The loudest critics were also the most hesitant to move forward. They were all talk and no action. Then, Uncle Yu, a retired veteran, entered the chat with a determined stance. He warned that allowing Chen Zhenghao to continue unchecked would doom them all and offered to lead the charge against him. His words stirred the homeowners, with many pledging support. Some offered weapons, while others proposed ambush strategies. They reasoned that Chen Zhenghao was just one man, and with coordinated efforts, they could overpower him. Uncle Yu built on this momentum, noting that besides the gun, Chen Zhenghao had only 5 or 6 followers. However, he cautioned that a dozen or so young men would be needed to ensure a successful operation. Just as volunteers were beginning to step forward, a woman suddenly interrupted, casting doubt on the entire plan. She reminded everyone that Auntie Lin had recently tricked them out of their supplies, questioning whether Uncle Yu might do the same. What if he led them all to surrender, leaving the elderly, the weak, women, and children vulnerable? Her skepticism sowed seeds of distrust among the group, splitting the homeowners into 2 factions. The radicals were ready to unite and fight, while the conservatives, now suspicious of Uncle Yu, refused to take any risks. Watching this bickering go on for 2 hours, I sighed, recognizing the familiar pattern from my past life. Back then, it was this same indecision and blame-shifting that led to the brutal deaths of most of the homeowners at the hands of Chen Zhenghao. But as they squabbled, I was content to enjoy my curry rice, filled with corn, green peppers, tomatoes, and chicken, unconcerned by their fate. Meanwhile, Chen Zhenghao, emboldened by his gun, continued his spree of robberies throughout the building. He didn't even spare his own followers, executing anyone who dared to resist with a single shot. He knew that without the gun, his control over them would crumble. As I watched through my surveillance, I noticed something alarming. Chen Zhenghao was ordering his men to gather the bodies of those he had killed. It became clear to me that he was planning to use them as backup food. This realization solidified my decision that the time to confront him was approaching. The next morning, Lu Tiantian, the leader of the conservative faction, sent a desperate plea for help in the WeChat group. She called on everyone to save her, insisting that Uncle Yu and the others should be able to fend off Chen Zhenghao and his men. As the banging on her door grew more intense, her messages became more frantic, warning that if she fell, none of them would be safe. But before she could finish, her door was broken down, and she was dragged out like a lifeless rag doll. Her desperate cries for help did not evoke sympathy. Instead, they were met with mocking comments from the radicals, who saw it as karma for her hesitation and cowardice. Elsewhere, Fan Yuqing and her friends were also growing increasingly anxious. They knew that if they didn't act soon, their turn would come. At this moment, Fan Yuqing devised a plan. She would spread the news that I, Zhang Yi, had hoarded a large amount of supplies, then rally everyone to take over my house. I was quickly added to a mutual aid group chat, where I noticed Fan Yuqing had tagged me. She warned that it was too dangerous for everyone to live separately and suggested that my solid door could serve as a secure base for the group. She emphasized the need for unity, hinting that if I remained alone, Chen Zhenghao would eventually deal with me. Her words made me laugh. It was clear they were trying the same manipulation tactics they had used in the previous life. I responded indifferently, saying that I was perfectly content living alone in my small, 150 square meter home with heating and electricity. My response triggered an immediate uproar in the chat. People accused me of being short-sighted, insisting that everyone needed to band together. Fan Yuqing added a moral twist, arguing that saving 7 lives would be akin to building a 48-story pagoda in heaven. But instead of engaging further, I simply left the group chat. My abrupt departure left Fan Yuqing and the others stunned. They couldn't fathom how I, once a bootlicker in their eyes, had transformed into someone so confident and dismissive. Their shock quickly turned into a discussion on how to take over my home. Glasses Man suggested that as long as they were well protected, they could simply force their way in and take me down. Brown Hair, who boasted about his experience working at a lock company, claimed he could open any lock on the market. With a plan in place, they gathered at my door, armed with umbrellas to shield themselves from any potential cold water traps. But as Brown Hair tried to pry open my lock, he quickly realized it was an impossible task. Despite his best efforts, the lock didn't budge. Watching this unfold on my surveillance system, I couldn't help but sneer. My 5-layer reinforced security door was akin to a bank vault, and a mere lockpicker had no chance of breaking through. Then, I activated the high-voltage electric defense system. The surge of electricity shocked Brown Hair, causing him to cry out for help before he collapsed, his body emitting a puff of black smoke. This sight left Fan Yuqing and the others paralyzed with shock. The high voltage had left Brown Hair's hands stuck to the door, his lifeless body a grim reminder of the consequences of their actions. But I felt no guilt. They had come to my door with the intention of taking what was mine by force. At that moment, Glasses Man pointed at the door and cursed me, accusing me of being a beast who had just killed someone who only wanted to talk. He demanded an explanation for Lu Tao's death, but his words only made me laugh. "You came to pry my door," I replied. "There's no need to explain your intentions." Shaking my head, I calmly loaded my crossbow. "Isn't it better to stay alive?" I muttered to myself. In the next moment, an arrow shot out from the small window in my door, striking Glasses Man squarely in the left arm. Xiao Peng, who had been standing by, rushed to help him up. They hadn't expected me to be so ruthless or to act so decisively. My message was clear. I wasn't going to be an easy target, and if they pushed any further, they'd have to deal with the consequences. As the 3 intruders barely moved away from Zhang Yi's door, 2 more arrows flew out from the small window, striking Xiao Peng and another neighbor with precision. The unexpected attack caused Fan Yuqing and the remaining women to flee in panic, fearing they might be next. Back in their lodgings, the injured men lay on the ground in agony. The extreme cold further complicated their situation, as untreated wounds in such conditions could easily lead to necrosis. The rusty arrows posed an additional threat, with no antibiotics or proper medical care available. Regret and despair overtook Glasses Man as he realized the dire nature of their predicament. Xiao Peng's cousin, Wang Min, confronted Fan Yuqing in frustration, blaming her for the situation. Fan Yuqing, feeling the sting of Wang Min's anger, tried to defend herself, though her excuses did little to pacify Wang Min. Xiao Peng intervened to shield Fan Yuqing, showing his loyalty despite the unfolding chaos. Desperate for a solution, they reached out to Dr. Zhou, a medical professional in the community, hoping she could provide assistance. Upon examining the wounds, Dr. Zhou was alarmed by their severity. She noted that without the right equipment and medication, including antibiotics, the chances of survival were minimal. The situation was further complicated by the rusty arrows, which made treatment even more hazardous. Wang Min, devastated by the grim prognosis, fell to her knees, pleading for help. Dr. Zhou explained the risks of attempting to remove the arrows without proper medical intervention, emphasizing the severity of the injuries. Fan Yuqing then recalled that Zhang Yi had received a delivery of drugs about a month ago, including antibiotics. She suggested they approach him for help, believing there might still be supplies available. Glasses Man, now hopeful, pushed for this course of action, insisting that Zhang Yi should be held accountable for the injuries. Wang Min, still reeling from their recent encounter, doubted Zhang Yi's willingness to assist, given their hostile confrontation. Fan Yuqing, however, maintained that they were in the right and that Zhang Yi should provide aid, given their current predicament. Xiao Qi, observing the unfolding situation, expressed her disapproval of the group's actions and their rationalizations. Wang Min suddenly assigned Fan Yuqing the task of retrieving the medicine, citing her previous connection with Zhang Yi as the reason she was the most suitable for the job. Xiao Peng, known for his sycophantic behavior, added that they would need Fan Yuqing's help, as he could only protect her once his arrow wound was healed. Fan Yuqing reluctantly agreed, though she was doubtful of her own abilities and decided to try reaching out by phone. She called my number, urgently requesting assistance for Lu Tao and Zhou Peng, who were in critical condition. I responded with a sense of indifference, pointing out that everyone faces death eventually and questioning their chances of surviving the snowstorm. With the city blocked by heavy snow and their building isolated, the prospects of survival were bleak, with either starvation or threats from Chen Zhenghao looming. Overwhelmed, Fan Yuqing expressed remorse for her past mistakes and pleaded for forgiveness, emphasizing the dire situation of Zhou Peng and the others who risked dying from infections without medicine. Wang Min then took over the phone, urging me to show some goodwill, suggesting that future needs might arise. In response, I revealed that I had used rusty arrows intentionally to avoid future encounters with them and expressed distrust regarding their potential betrayal. Wang Min, defending their character, insisted they were good citizens. I noted that true goodwill was unlikely from those who tried to take over someone else's property. Despite this, I mentioned that helping them was not entirely out of the question, especially considering my long-standing feelings for Fan Yuqing. I hinted at the possibility of allowing her to come alone. Fan Yuqing eagerly accepted this offer, expressing her willingness to be with me, while her best friend, Lin Caning, also showed enthusiasm for joining. Fan Yuqing rejected Lin Caning's request, stating that I only wanted her and that Lin Caning should stay behind. Wang Min reacted with anger, chastising Fan Yuqing for her perceived shamelessness and troublemaking. Zhou Peng, in disbelief, confronted Fan Yuqing about her apparent betrayal and previous disdain for me. Fan Yuqing defended her decision by emphasizing the need for a better life and the inevitability of death if they remained together. She highlighted that while Zhou Peng had only provided a limited amount of supplies, I had a much larger stockpile, making my place a more viable option for survival. Upon hearing the news, the ardent admirer collapsed in defeat, unable to win the battle of affection even before it truly began. Fan Yuqing, resolute, turned and walked away without looking back. Lin Caning, upset, threw Fan Yuqing to the ground, protesting the unfairness of her exclusive benefits. Wang Min joined in, berating Fan Yuqing for her selfishness and suggesting that if things weren't going well for everyone, they shouldn't go well for her either. Zhou Qi, watching the scene unfold, chose to remain silent but reminded everyone of the pressing issue. The wounds were only temporarily treated, and without proper medicine, they needed to be prepared for worsening conditions. The glasses man, struck by a new idea, proposed a strategy to deal with me. He suggested that they inform everyone in the building about my well-stocked supplies, hoping that if they couldn't confront me themselves, they could incite others to do so. This way, they could potentially benefit from the situation without directly engaging me. Fan Yuqing, panicked, objected to such an underhanded plan, fearing it would ruin her chances with me. Wang Min, incensed by Fan Yuqing's opposition, attempted to strike her, but Zhou Peng intervened, professing his genuine affection for Fan Yuqing and asserting his belief that he would eventually win her love. He reassured Fan Yuqing, promising his unwavering support. Wang Min, frustrated but prioritizing the immediate issue, quickly posted images of lavish food in the homeowners group. She highlighted the disparity between the dire conditions faced by others and the abundance in my home, questioning the fairness of the situation. Chen Zhenghao, seeing the post, became eager to seek revenge and settle old scores, envisioning an opportunity to benefit from my resources. The homeowners group erupted with responses. Some demanded that I share my supplies, while others made extreme offers in exchange for access. Amid the flurry of messages, I responded with amusement, questioning why I should share my resources and recalling the grievances I had with these individuals. I was intrigued to see how they would react to my refusal and planned to handle the situation on my terms. Seeing my reply, the bootlickers and others were left stunned, questioning whether I was afraid of their potential alliance against me. Some blamed me for their hardship, insisting that I should atone for hoarding supplies by sharing them. They argued that living alone lacked purpose and that younger people should have a spirit of contribution. Uninterested in their arguments, I turned my attention to the snowfall outside and considered taking a break from staying at home. I contemplated going for a stroll, relieved that I had snowmobiles hidden away. Just then, a notification appeared on my phone, a plea for help from Dr. Zhou Qi, who reported that their home's medicine and supplies were completely depleted. Recognizing the name, I recalled what Zhou Qi looked like. In my previous life, her demise came after she sacrificed her last food to Xia Lime and her daughter. Despite having a favorable impression of her from that life, I wasn't willing to immediately agree to her plea. My past experiences had taught me that beauty could often conceal danger, and I had no intention of dying at the hands of a woman after just regaining my life. I needed to be certain of her trustworthiness before offering any help. Thus, I responded, proposing that I could provide supplies, but only in exchange for something of value. Shokir quickly agreed to become my private medical assistant in return. However, I didn't accept her initial offer and instead asked for a favor. I needed her to act as my spy to gather the plans of the other homeowners who were on the brink of taking action. I made it clear that she had a choice. She could either align herself with the others and remain a bystander or betray them to side with me. Shokir fell silent, understanding the gravity of her decision. If she chose to ally with me, she would face the collective opposition of the entire building. Little did she know, I had fortified my house into an impregnable stronghold. Even a tank couldn't breach it. My true intention was to test her loyalty. Meanwhile, the glasses man sent me a final ultimatum, demanding whether I would surrender my supplies or not. I responded with a cold smile, fully aware that he had overstepped his bounds. I cheerfully replied that I wouldn't share a single bit of my supplies, even if I had to feed them to pigs. This enraged the glasses man, who, grinding his teeth, warned me that I would face the consequences of my defiance and that they had given me a fair chance. A chat group was soon formed to denounce me. Chen Zhenghao stated that for their operation to eliminate me, he required only half of the supplies, and he vowed not to harm anyone else once he received them. Glasses man supported this, urging everyone to put aside past grievances and focus on taking me down. On the other hand, after careful consideration, Shokir finally accepted my terms. She understood that, as a single woman in this apocalyptic world, she needed to align with a strong figure to ensure her survival. Soon after, I received a warning from Shokir and Uncle Yu about a planned full-scale attack by the glasses man and his group at 2:30 that night. I wasn't alarmed, rather, I was curious about the chaos they would cause. Shokir sent another message, noting their frenzied state and urging me to come up with a plan. I simply laughed at her message, glanced at the guns beside me, and responded that she didn't need to worry about it. I reminded her to stay clear of their actions and that this was my final warning. With those words, I picked up my gun and settled in, ready to watch the show unfold. As the clock struck 2:30 in the morning, a group of armed individuals approached my fortified home, intent on taking me down. Their determined cries echoed through the night, vowing to eliminate me, Zhang Yi, for my supposed selfishness. Chen Zhenghao and his gang quickly surrounded the corridor leading to my entrance, shouting for me to come out and threatening dire consequences if I didn't comply. From my vantage point via the surveillance system, I watched their approach with amusement, not bothering to extend any courtesy. I activated the high-voltage device, and as several of the younger attackers attempted to force their way through the door, they were instantly electrocuted, leaving behind a plume of black smoke. The sight of their charred remains left the rest of the group stunned and fearful, their attempt at retreat thwarted by Chen Zhenghao and his crew. Chen Zhenghao, determined to press on, threatened those who hesitated, warning them of death if they did not continue. He urged them to persist, insisting that my high-voltage defenses would eventually fail. Glasses man, acting as their strategist, rallied the group with promises of revenge for their fallen comrades. He assured them that breaking through my iron door would lead to a warm fireplace and endless food. Motivated by Glasses man's encouragement, even those who initially wanted to flee were now filled with resolve. They picked up wooden stakes and relentlessly battered my door, driven by the promise of food. Intrigued by their efforts, I decided to amplify their experience. I retrieved a large speaker from another dimension and, noting their industriousness, played a battle song for them. The tune seemed to energize the attackers, driving them to strike the door with even more fervor. Despite their relentless assault, after half an hour of ceaseless pounding, a few of them collapsed from exhaustion. Their frustration grew as they realized that their efforts had barely made a dent in the door. Glasses man, who worked at a bank, assessed the situation and identified the door as a bank vault-grade barrier. He explained that such a door was impervious to even a tank, let alone the wooden stakes they were wielding. The group was stunned by Glasses man's revelation about the impenetrable steel door. They questioned if there was any way to breach it, and Glasses man, with a resigned sigh, explained that without a top locksmith, there was no hope of opening it without the key. As he spoke, I approached the door with my crossbow and, with a quiet murmur about their professionalism, fired an arrow. The sight of Glasses man being struck by the arrow sent the other residents into a frenzy. Realizing that I had weapons they hadn't been informed about, they panicked. Those who were slower were quickly dispatched by my arrows. As I looked at the fallen neighbors, I felt no remorse. If they sought my life, I had no reason to hold back. Glasses Man, despite his injury, quickly devised a new plan. He suggested that while the steel door was formidable, the walls might still be made of cement bricks. Convinced that they could break through, he rallied the group with renewed hope. The neighbors, now motivated, began to vigorously smash the wall with their makeshift tools. Glasses Man's encouragement spurred them on, and soon, cracks started to appear. However, their progress was abruptly halted when a loud metallic clang echoed through the corridor. The impact numbed the arm of one of the big men. Glasses Man inspected the wall and discovered that it was also reinforced with steel plates. Shocked by this revelation, the group questioned who would use steel plates for wall construction, but they continued their efforts, hoping to find a weak spot. I watched their futile attempts with amusement. I had reinforced my outer walls with 1/2 meter of high-quality steel. Not even a sniper rifle bullet could breach it, let alone their hammers. The neighbors soon realized that I must have anticipated the apocalypse and prepared a fortress accordingly. Glasses Man's anger grew, and he condemned me as selfish and narrow-minded, focusing solely on my own safety while ignoring others' lives. Some of the group, overwhelmed by despair, began to cry. Chen Zhenghao, stepping forward, urged them not to give up. He questioned whether the ceiling and floor were also reinforced with steel and suggested that they split up to tear down the house from all angles. He refused to believe that my home was impenetrable. Reinvigorated by Chen Zhenghao's words, the neighbors dispersed, hammering at different parts of the house. From my vantage point on the surveillance cameras, I chuckled at their determination. Despite Chen Zhenghao's strategic insight, their efforts were in vain. My house, designed as an impenetrable fortress, would resist their attempts for years if necessary. Without advanced tools, they had no chance of breaching my reinforced steel walls. As the hours passed, one of the neighbors, having not eaten for 2 days and expending tremendous energy in their futile attempts to break into my home, felt his stomach growling. The thought of a large piece of meat sparked an idea. He glanced at a neighboring resident, and they both drooled at the thought of food. Realizing their mutual desire, they awkwardly averted their gazes. Meanwhile, Glasses Man was overwhelmed with despair. He lamented the harsh reality of the apocalypse, cursing my refusal to sacrifice for the collective good. In a moment of inspiration, he remembered that I had floor-to-ceiling windows on my balcony. He proposed that they might be able to break in through there. This suggestion rekindled the group's hope. They set their sights on the balcony, determined to find a way inside. They assembled planks and made their way to my balcony, shouting threats and demands for me to open the door. I watched them from the safety of my home, calmly sipping my coffee. I knew that glass could be just as resilient as metal. After a period of futile knocking, they realized that the windows were not easily breached. Unperturbed, I decided to escalate the situation. I walked to the kitchen, prepared a homemade Molotov cocktail, and placed it through a small window leading to the balcony. Within moments, a hole appeared in the ceiling of the balcony area. The neighbors, caught off guard, were soon engulfed in flames from the Molotov cocktail. The intense heat caused one of them to wail in agony before leaping off the balcony. Witnessing the scene, the remaining neighbors, now filled with regret and fear, pressed against the glass, pleading for mercy. Their previous actions had shown no remorse, and their pleas were met with cold indifference. They were forced to retreat, but Glasses Man and his group prevented their escape, even attacking those who tried to turn back. The fire quickly consumed those left behind, turning them to charcoal. Amid this chaos, Glasses Man and his group warmed themselves by the fire. The remaining neighbors, starved and humbled, dropped their weapons and returned to the balcony, begging for help. They pleaded for a bite to eat, promising to comply with any demands. I sighed at their pleas and remarked that their desperation made me feel oddly sentimental. I admitted that I had a peculiar quirk. When I felt upset, I wanted to eat. I began eating noodles, the sight of which only intensified their hunger. They yearned for even a small portion of soup. I decided to set a new condition. I told them that I was not heartless and would offer them a chance to earn their sustenance. If they brought me Chen Zhenghao's head, I would provide them with noodles for a week, enough for every meal. Their eyes lit up with excitement as they turned their gaze towards Chen Zhenghao, now their new target. At that moment, Chen Zhenghao felt like a tempting target, his presence a promise of food and drink for a week. The predatory gazes fixed on him sent a chill down his spine, a stark reminder of the lurking danger. Before he could fully comprehend the situation, his potential attackers began to move, yet the sight of his gun kept them at a cautious distance. As Chen Zhenghao checked his messages, a bounty notice from the homeowner group chat caught his eye. The reward for his death, a week's supply of food. The realization struck him hard, and without hesitation, he fled, finally understanding the hostility directed his way. The following morning, the tension escalated. Neighbors had laid out ambushes, waiting for Chen Zhenghao to make a move. Despite possessing a pistol, he was acutely aware of his limited ammunition. His impenetrable safe house was beyond their reach, a fact proven by earlier failed attempts that had already cost dozens of lives. Faced with the prospect of starvation, they saw no better option than to target the weakened Chen Zhenghao. As he berated his subordinates to venture out and scavenge snow, the reality of his situation became clear. To the others, he was nothing more than vulnerable prey, and time was running out. Suddenly, two neighbors who had been lying in wait launched a surprise attack with kitchen knives, the sense of imminent danger surging to the forefront as his subordinates reacted in shock.